Okay, in this video, we are going to solve these two polynomial inequalities. But before we do, it's important to look at the procedure. So these are my 3 steps, and step 1 says write polynomial inequality with one side equal to 0. Step 2 says factor the polynomial and determine the zeros. Step 3 says find intervals where conditions of inequalities are met. So let's begin. So step 1 says write polynomial inequality with one side equal to 0. So one side is already 0, so we have to factor this out. So the way we're going to do this, both of them have an x, and we think to ourselves, what number times itself gives you negative 10, but adds up to give you negative 3, and we got negative 5 plus 2, because negative 5 times 2 is negative 10, negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. If factoring is still kind of tricky, I'm going to put a playlist with different factoring method. So is greater than 0. Now step 2 says factor the polynomial and determine the zeros. So we need to make this piece equal to 0 because 0 times any number would give us 0. So we need to think, how can we make this piece 0? Well, negative 2 plus 2 is equal to 0, and 0 times any number is 0. So we're going to get x is equal to negative 2, and now we have to do this piece. So what value of x makes this piece 0? Well, x is equal to 5 would give us 0. Now, this is important. These values makes 0, and 0 is not bigger than 0. This whole 0 is just a kind of a placeholder. It's going to help us lead us to get the correct answer. So step 3 says find the interval where the conditions are met. And the way we're going to do this is going to play a critical role. So we're going to draw a quick number line, and we're going to put those 2 points, negative 2 and 5. And we want this piece to be bigger than 0. We know at negative 2 we get 0, and at 5 we get 0. So to the left of it or to the right of it, it might be negative, it might be positive. And that's really how we're going to determine the conditions where we will have greater than 0. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to create a little table. I need to pick a number less than negative 2. Negative 3 could work. I need to pick a number between negative 2 and 5. Well, 0 is a nice one. I need to pick a number bigger than 5, and 6 is bigger than 5. So the next step is to plug in this value. Negative 3 plus 2 would give us a negative 1, but really we're just focusing on negatives and positive. So we'll put a negative. And negative 3 minus 5 would give us a negative 8, so negative. And a negative times a negative is a positive. And we want positive because we want a value bigger than 0. And any number that's positive is bigger than 0. Next, we're going to try 0. If x is 0, 0 plus 2 is positive and is negative, and a positive times a negative is a negative, so that's going to be less than 0, so not going to be one of our answers. And now we'll try 6. 6 plus 2 is 8, so positive. 6 minus 5 is positive 1, so positive, and a positive times a positive is a positive. And if you want to do a sketch of this, you could say an open circle, and it goes all the way left. The reason it's an open circle is at negative 2, you get 0, and 0 is not bigger than 0. That's why it does not include negative 2. But it could include negative 2.000001, some value here. Now, what also was bigger than 0 was 6. So again, we're going to do an open circle at 5, because at 5 you get 0, and we want greater than 0. So we'll draw an arrow going this way. And so to write our answer, you could say parentheses negative infinity, comma negative 2, close parentheses. The reason we're using parentheses is that at negative infinity, you can never get to infinity. That's why it's a parentheses. And the reason this is a parentheses also is at negative 2, it's going to be 0. It's not going to be greater than 0, so it's not included. So it's like all the values like negative infinity all the way to negative 2, but not including negative 2 because at negative 2, it's 0. Then you put the word u or union. Then you do another parentheses, 5 to infinity. Same reason, at 5 you get 0, and you want a number bigger than 0. And it goes all the way to infinity, and you can never reach infinity. That's why infinity has a parentheses. And so this right here is our final answer. Okay, our second problem, again, same first step. First step says write polynomial inequality with one side equal to 0. So we need to move this piece to the left so you can subtract 4x on both sides. Subtract 4x on both sides. You need to get rid of the negative 20, and opposite of negative 20 is a positive 20. So we're going to add 20 on both sides. So our equation will be x cubed minus 5x squared minus 4x plus 20 is less than or equal to 0. That's very important because step 1, we need one side to be 0. So we're going to put a parentheses around the first two pieces and the last two pieces. This is a negative 4x, so what I'm going to do is write plus negative 4x. So I'm going to put a parenthesis around these two pieces. And with this grouping method, we see what's common between these two pieces. So he's an x cubed, he's an x squared. The smallest one is an x squared, so we'll put x squared. Parentheses, x squared times what is x cubed? X. X squared times what is negative 5x squared? Negative 5. Close parentheses. Plus, now we do our negative 4x plus 20. Negative 4x plus 20. So we see what's common between the two. We could take out a negative 4. Negative 4 times what gives you negative 4x? X. Negative 4 times what gives you 20? Negative 5. Is less than or equal to 0. Again, this version and this version is identical. We can check x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 5 is negative 5x squared. Plus minus, which is just minus. So minus 4 times x is minus 4x. Minus 4 times negative 5 is times 20. A negative times a negative is a positive. And so we notice one piece is the same. That piece is the same. We get to keep. So we'll write x minus 5, close parentheses, parentheses, the leftover piece, x squared minus 4, close parentheses, is less than or equal to 0. Well, this piece you can actually factor further because x plus 2 times x minus 2 is one of those perfect squares. X times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. 2 times x is 2x, and 2x minus 2x is 0x. And then 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. And then we had our x minus 5 is less than or equal to 0. So, cool. So we need to find the intervals where the conditions are met, so we can draw our quick number line. Before we do, we got to think, how can we make this piece 0? Because 0 times any number is still going to give us 0. And so we know if x is equal to negative 2 plus 2 is 0. Same idea for this piece, so it's going to be x is equal to positive 2 because 2 minus 2 is 0. And then this piece, x is equal to 5 because 5 minus 5 is 0. So once we have that, we put that in our number line. So we have negative 2, positive 2, and 5. And we want it to be less than or equal to 0. So we'll draw again a quick little table to help us out. So we need a number less than negative 2. Let's say negative 3. We need a number between negative 2 and 2. 0 is a nice one. A number between 2 and 5, 3. And a number bigger than 5, we can do 6. So we're just going to plug it back in here. A negative 3 plus 2 is going to give us a negative number. A negative 3 minus 2 is going to give us a negative number. And a negative 3 minus 5 is going to give us a negative number. And a negative times a negative is a positive. A positive times a negative is a negative. So we'll get a negative number. And that's what we want. We want the value to be less than or equal to 0. So now we'll try 0. 0 plus 2 is going to give us a positive 2. And then 0 minus 2 is going to give us a negative. 0 minus 5 is going to give us a negative. And a negative times a negative is a positive. A positive times a positive is a positive. So we'll do 3. 3 plus 2 is 5, so positive. 3 minus 2 is going to give us a positive 1. 3 minus 5 is going to give us a negative 2. A positive times a positive is a positive, and a positive times a negative is a negative. And one more. So 6 plus 2 is going to give us a positive 8. 6 times negative 2 is going to give us a positive 4, so positive. And 6 minus 5 is going to give us a positive 1, so positive. So we're going to get a positive out of it. Now this problem is a little bit different than the last one in that the inequality says less than or equal to 0. So at 0, we like it. So it's going to be a closed circle. That means it includes it. And we're saying at negative 3, we get a negative value. And we want negative because a negative would give us a true statement. A negative number is less than 0. So all of this are answers. So 0 is positive and we don't want that. but 3 is negative, so we can connect the dot, and 6 is positive, and we don't want that. And so this is how we can write our answer. Parentheses, negative infinity, all the way to the left, comma, -2, but a bracket. Bracket means you include that number. And the reason we don't have a bracket here is you can never get to infinity. It's one of those numbers that we can never get to. Then you use the word u or union, bracket 2, because we can get to 2, comma, 5, bracket, because you can get to 5. And that's how we can solve polynomial inequalities.